Keynote has already brought forth, and hopefully you will gain even more from what I think is probably the most magnificent literacy consultant that we have walking around. So let me give you a proper introduction to the woman that is on my left of the screen, Ms. Robyn J. Murphy, M.E.D., which, by the way, your alphabet soup doesn't even justify the background that I'm about to expose them to, because you have amassed quite the accomplishments. And I'm really, really grateful for that and looking forward to this presentation, because I am a mama and a grandmama. So you can school me on how to make sure that I school them as well. So for those of you who are brand new to Ms. Robyn Murphy, she is a literacy consultant assisting teachers, parents, leaders, and school districts as they work to improve reading cultures. I want you to really understand that. This isn't just teaching kids the A, B, C, D of reading, right? It's the culture of reading, because we know as working professionals that leaders are readers. So our next generation of leaders are coming through Ms. Robyn Murphy. So be mindful of that and make sure you take good tips so you can make sure that your people that you are connected to, whether they are your biological children, your fostered children, or maybe the neighbors that you really grimace at every time you see them, hand them babies a book and introduce them to Ms. Robyn Murphy. Ms. Murphy's 35 plus years in education, started in New York City as an elementary school teacher and 3rd and 4th grade reading specialist. Those are hard years. And if you have kids, you know that 8 through 11-year-old, span, depending on when they entered in school, is really trying and emotional for their behavioral development, which actually impresses upon how well they're taking to reading and building their confidence. So that's super crucial. And the fact that you know how to deal with those little people, I give you kudos. She's also served as 7th and 8th grade language arts teachers in Darby, PA. I know Darby really well, and that's a tough district, as well as literacy coach at West Philadelphia High School. If you are from Philadelphia, you're already bowing down to Ms. Murphy right now. Her career also includes a lengthy tenure at Girl Scouts of the USA's national headquarters, where she served as Daisy Brownie program specialist. Oh, a handbook and leader's guide about the director of national relations, which is really important. And she has assisted teachers and school leaders in over 25 school districts all over the country. Currently, Ms. Robyn is the CEO and president of Further Her Consulting Group, which includes a women's empowerment coaching and the parents literacy coach, an early literacy specialist with the Children's Literacy Initiative, and an independent 31 senior consultant. You're going to have to tell us more about what that is. Robyn is also a founding member, because why not? Why wouldn't she have another hat, right? She is also a founding member of Making a Way International and serves on the board of directors. In addition, she serves as a member of the Community Service Committee of the Black Women's Educational Alliance, and she lives in the greater Philadelphia area with her husband, Kevin, who better be a reader. So welcome, Ms. Robyn. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so very much for that exciting introduction. You make me sound so fabulous.
I don't even think I did you justice. I'm about to bow down myself and exit left so you can teach us all a thing or two. I thank you so much for showing up, and I'll let you have the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. So I am going to share my screen and pull up my presentation, which is not very full, but it helps keep me on track. So let's do this. Give me one more second. All right. I'm hoping that you can see that now. It says it's sharing, but I can't see the chat, so I'm going to continue and hope that it is sharing properly. Uh-oh. Let's see. All right, I'm going to hope that it's sharing properly now. If someone could chime in, because I can't see the chat, I'd appreciate it. However, okay, so let's talk about parents and schools partnering together to create readers. Like Nikita said, I have a long history in education, in literacy, in reading development, and how to help teachers, parents, school leaders, districts move into a space where their literacy culture is helpful and nurturing for their children. So I have lots of years of experience. The last 18 years, I've been coaching teachers. So Nikita mentioned about the work I've done at West Philly High. At West Philly High, I was working with the content area teachers on how to better have students be able to do their work. So the chemistry teachers, the math teachers, you have to read in every subject. And so how do those teachers make sure that the students are getting the content in a way that is helpful to them? For many, many years, I worked for a company that had me all over the entire country, rural, suburban, urban, metropolitan settings, working with teachers in their classroom, so a job embedded experience in their classroom to figure out how they can better support the literacy lives of their children. And so I have seen thousands of reading lessons, like thousands, literally. And so pre-K through 12th grade, I have seen pretty much, there's very little that I have not encountered. So lots of times parents want to know, why do I have to be involved? Isn't that why I send them to school? Isn't that why I sent them to the best school imaginable? So we're not even talking folks who are necessarily using the public school systems. We're talking about folks who are using private schools, paying big tuition, but yet taking a hands-off approach to what their children are capable of as readers. So why do you have to be involved? Because it's critical for you to understand where your child is. Now, I am sure that during this time of emergency remote learning, which is what we call it, because it's not really online and it's not really homeschooling, because those are systems that are in place in areas where folks are taught exactly how to do it. Folks opt into exactly that particular format. This is emergency remote learning. This is virtual learning, but it's important for parents to understand that you need to have a relationship with the school. Why do you need to have a relationship with the school? Because it sets the tone for what students are, what your child thinks about school. It also helps you understand the benchmarks. What is my child supposed to be able to do at this point? What are they supposed to be able to do by the end of the year? All of that information is information that parents need to have, and they won't get it unless they partner with the school, and in particular with that child's classroom teacher. So I've heard of situations where, now that we're in remote learning, parents can actually see and hear how their child interacts with classmates, with the teacher, how they are doing. Do they ask a lot of questions? Do they seem to understand? All of those things are now privy to us, where in the brick and mortar world, you didn't have any idea of how your child interacted in school, and you may have only heard from the teacher about interaction if it was negative. And so you have to understand where your child is currently and where they're supposed to be in this school experience. So School is a place where your child should feel successful. There's so much in life that they don't have control over, but school is basically a child's entire life, their existence, where they meet people, where they know people, they have their friends, they have experience for many, many hours of the day. And so they're feeling successful there, and they should feel successful. If they're not, it's your job as the parent to figure out, how come my child's not successful? What do I have to do to make sure that they will be successful going forward? And side note, a whole different conversation. If your child needs additional support, now is the time to figure it out. Now is the time to implement it. Now is the time to get on board with that. It's never too early and it's never too late. Okay? So make sure you ask the teacher all kinds of questions. Now, I remember being a classroom teacher, and there is a thing that they call, the nightmare parent or the helicopter parent, but that's your child, and it's your responsibility to understand what they need. So ask the teacher all kinds of questions. Now, as it relates to literacy, I think it's important for you to understand what are the reading skills that your child has, because honestly, reading drives everything else forever, right? So where does your child rank nationally, in the state, the district, the school, even in that classroom? Because we know that where your child is in the grand scheme of things is going to be determining how they receive, what kinds of supports they receive, how they even pushed forward in that classroom. You also want to understand what assessments are being used, especially as it relates to reading. What are they using? What is the assessment actually judging? And if the scores are not where you would like them to be, because they can tell you your child is average, but do you want an average child? Most people want something higher. And I'm not saying anything wrong with average, but if you want higher, then you need to understand what needs to happen in order for that child, your child, to do better. Okay, so what is the assessment judging? What are they looking at? What is the skill, the strategy that is being assessed? And recognize this, throughout the school experience, throughout all the different subjects, your child will be ahead or behind others, and that's okay. Everybody isn't fantastic in everything. As fabulous as I was as a reader as a kid, I was unfabulous as a math student. So everybody has something different that they excel at. But are you aware of what that thing is for your child? It's important for you to know so that, again, you can be that support for them. You may come up with some things where you're like, wow, I didn't know my child was great at that. That's something you might want to continue to nurture. If you find out, wow, they don't really do that well, then that's something that you might want to support. And some of these things, most of these things you can do on your own. You haven't heard me say, run and get a tutor. You haven't heard me say, run over to that supplemental program. There are things that can be done right in your home to support both ends of the spectrum. So, home is where your child should get exposure. Now, we're talking about my experiences pre-K to 12, but what I also know is so much can happen, needs to happen, and will happen in the years from the womb to pre-K. So that time that you're home, there are things that can and should be happening. Always, always, always read to a child, even in the womb. Always, always, always give them experiences. Talk about everything. Build vocabulary. Have books in the home. Have opportunities for them to learn new vocabulary. There's really no need to dumb down words for children. They learn their vocabulary and will use the words that they are familiar with. So if they're familiar with higher level words, those are the words that they are going to use. So make sure that when it's your time with your child, that you are giving them a series of experiences that will be helpful to their development. So, in the midst of all of this upheaval in the world, it is important that you understand where education is headed. So those of us in the field, school districts around the country are learning a lot about how we've been doing education and how we might do education in the future. Please stay on top of your child's school about what direction they're heading in. There are schools who are, and we're talking to people all over the place, but there are schools that are back in session full time. There are schools that are totally virtual. There are schools that are doing a hybrid model where kids come in certain days of the week or certain times of the day. And so make sure you understand for your child which situation your district is in, which situation they are moving toward as the school year goes further along, and then make sure that whatever that situation is, that it is going to work well for your child, the people that live in your house. Children need to be successful at home and at school as it relates to their literacy. So we want to make sure that parents have full opportunity, full options to make sure that they are doing all that is necessary to build up and what I like to call grow readers. So I have a resource that you can get at furtherheard.com/education, which talks about how to build a home reading habit for your family, because it is important that children are in front of books, in front of words, using words, building background knowledge every single day. And so this resource gives you a checklist of all the different things you can do to make sure that at your house, in your home, your children are getting exposed to as much literacy as possible. So I would like to take any questions at this point.
Hi. Robyn, can you see me? Robyn, can you see me?
I can.
Awesome, awesome. Hold on 1 second. I must have something open. Let me close that. I had a little bit of an echo. I had to get rid of it. All right, we have a couple of questions. Sharon asks, what is your thought about audiobooks? And I think a parlay to that is, do you have recommendations for using audiobooks with children all the way up to adults?
Okay, so you've heard about my long history with reading. I personally am not a fan of audiobooks, but I recognize that that's the rest of the world loves it. Mm-hmm. I believe that my issue is because I've been an avid reader my entire life, when I am listening to a story mm-hmm. that I know is a book. See, it's one, so this is my own craziness. If I know it's a book, as the people are talking, I try to visualize the page. Mm-hmm. And it totally throws me off, like way off. Like I have to turn it off and go buy the book. The processing doesn't work for me, but I don't have a problem with audiobooks if it works for you. Mm-hmm. Now, back to children.
Yeah.
I don't believe it should be the only way children experience books. Children need to see text. The actual viewing of the text is what builds their reading muscles. And listening to stories doesn't build your reading muscles, it builds your listening muscles. So it can be, it's okay for it to be used in some points, but I would not have it be even a daily thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sharon said, yes, I understand. It limits the imagination. I got it. Also earlier, Ms. Sharon, you're on fire today. She says, having a relationship with your child's teacher goes a long way in the school year. I found as my experience with both my children who are now college students. So to your point, that's super important. Something that I wrote down, kind of interpreting something you said, which I thought was really important, was being open to seeing your child's strength, not just their weakness, to really encourage the growing of them as readers, which I thought was crucial. So another question that came up is when parents are hesitant to ask questions, for whatever their reasons are, maybe that they had their own, negative stories from growing up and having teachers not encourage that, whatever that might be, even though, you as the teacher, the literacy consultant may have said, no, really, truly, ask me the question, like you're giving them permission. Do you have an approach to really helping them understand it's a safe space? You're not judging them just because they have the question that maybe they felt like they should know the answer to, because, we get into that, authority, judgment, or feeling judged place. Have you taken certain approaches with those parents in the past?
Yes, and I think I totally get it. And that is definitely something that parents experience. Like you said, sometimes their own experience with school has been shaky or not good. Mm-hmm. And so they're not prone to approaching the situation. The first thing is to remember that now you're advocating for your child. So try to remove yourself from the situation, make it about your child. Mm-hmm. The second thing from the teacher end is to see if a one-on-one situation is better. So it's not like, there's 10 of us sitting here from open school night. Does anybody have any questions? But making it a more one-on-one, people are more apt to ask a difficult question or what they might think is an embarrassing question in a one-on-one situation than they would in a group setting.
So true. And even in this kind of virtual emergency world of teaching that we're living in right now, I know that many of the teachers have to use Zoom because that's, what the school districts are funding and what's accessible to them. There's breakout rooms in the Zooms that, of course, it's another learning curve, like even for the teachers who may not be techie, to learn how to use those breakout rooms to have that private consultative space for the parents. But then on the other side of that, we have teachers that need to be taught by you, right? Like and other encouraging teacher experts who are giving them compassion and patience to back up and be okay with the fact that they have their own new learning curve with all this technology, right?
Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that I'm a life coach as well.
Yes.
And since the spring where everything went into shutdown mode, the kinds of conversations I'm having with teachers are literally 60% life, 40% how do I do my job well? Mm-hmm. Because it is very, very difficult for teachers to adjust and adapt to the virtual world if that's not been their thing.
Yeah.
And so I would ask parents to have a little compassion and some grace attached to how you're approaching teachers right now, because they are struggling not only with the technology, because I struggle with the technology, mm-hmm. but they're also, for many of them, dealing with their own kids at the same time they're dealing with your child.
Right.
So if I'm a teacher and I've got my own children at home who are also in a virtual situation, and then I have to help my class at the same time, There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
They're also grappling with attendance. They're grappling with the issues that individual children have, where if we were in a physical setting, you could address and support very differently than what you can do on a Zoom call.
Which is a really serious thing with the multitasking that's necessary for most of us. Now, I think everyone that's here, for the people that I can see, and I know there's some that I can't, we probably consider ourselves to be high-level professionals, critical thinkers, people who are able to problem solve. And then when you are that person, and that's your identity, let's just assume that you're also a parent, and now you're faced with this new technology that not only your child has to answer, which actually Gracie mentioned in the comments as well, the technical challenges are there for the parents and the students. So you're trying to help your child, and then you're faced with your own inadequacies around how do you now learn this new thing in addition to all your hats. So your patience gets a little limited. So to your point as a life coach, really being able to help the parents deal with what's kind of underneath of that and address it, because they have this professional hat of like, I'm the person, I'm the fixer, right? I'm the problem solver. And now what do you mean I can't help my third grader?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And layer that with my third grader is not necessarily performing the way I thought.
Right.
Because being in the space with the child as they're learning, you're noticing some things that you were previously not privy to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so how do I deal with that? And what do I do? And honestly, for some parents, there's a level of embarrassment attached to it.
Absolutely.
And so how do I work through that while trying to make sure that I do whatever has to happen for my child to improve?
Which then adds on to their other level of self-limiting beliefs. Am I good enough, smart enough, ready, patient enough, strong enough, calm enough to now be the tutor and the teacher, two different things, right? Like from everything that you know, and all the other hats that I have. And then I'm dealing with that in the face of every day, this kid needs to be able to check these boxes off as complete while you work out whatever's going on with you and kind of being pressed against that constant deadline. So I see in the chat, we have a couple of statements. I have friends that are also struggling with the technology for the kids. Yes, I heard this firsthand from a teacher who was also struggling with virtual teaching. You are spot on. And another statement, wow, these are really tough times. So here's another question. There are kids that just don't want to go past those smaller books where there's like 5 words on a page. And they may not be the cardboard books, if I said that right. So the literacy consultant, I can't talk right now, but it may not be the cardboard books, but they're struggling with getting into the chapter books, right? The next level, which is really preparing them for adult reading, right? Like the novels and memoirs. Absolutely. And all of that. Do you recommend any non-traditional books like comic books or theater pamphlets or anything like that for children who are just really struggling with going from the books that had very few words on the page and more pictures to prepare them, as a more interim step if they're really just pushing back, like, I don't want this chapter book,
Yes. So that's something that is pretty typical.
Okay.
So the first thing is to get a better understanding of why the chapter book is a pushback, why they're pushing back. Chapter book reading for the early chapter books, I'm talking like 3 chapters, 40 pages, right? So the early chapter book, that should be happening if your child is on level the end of 2nd grade, right? But the pushback is typically a stamina issue and not an ability issue.
Interesting.
It's a stamina issue. If you think about it, the book looks a little thicker. However, there's a story that's going on for 40, 50, 60 pages. I have to keep in mind, who are these characters? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? From sitting to sitting to sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a lot of kids who don't read every day, who have not developed a habit of reading time, the struggle is the timing and the fluidity that it takes to hold on to a book, put it down, pick it back up, remember everything that's going on, remember who these people are and what they're doing, read some more, put it down, pick it up. It's not necessarily an ability thing. And so I would hesitate to move on to an alternative until we can figure out how they can function well in that space.
That makes sense.
So many times it's a series. So if you get them hooked on a series, then they typically want to continue. And most of those early chapter books are series books. So then they get used to the character. So now I don't have to worry about character. I can get more into the story. There's a progression that takes place in those early chapter book series for that main reason.
Oh, that's powerful, especially when you think about the limited attention span that adults now have. What are we down to 8 seconds these days, right? And then we're helping the kids who already are not developmentally there with attention spans try to have better attention. And they're looking at us saying, well, you go from thing to thing too. Like you're not necessarily sticking with, as Lauren said earlier, routines, consistency, that, and our kids are sponges and in my case, grandbabies, and they're watching. And they are truth tellers because they will tell on you.
Absolutely. So maybe you start by reading the chapter book to them.
Yeah.
So that they can hold on to this. It's really a stamina issue for most kids.
Oh, that's powerful. We have another question. When do you recognize a child has learning disabilities, such as dyslexia, to name an example that I can think of, and what cues should a parent look for?
So, if as a parent in your home, you have always had a reading routine of some kind, you will start to notice things.
Mm-hmm.
You'll start to notice stuff on your own, like you notice that they, don't like to pick up a pencil at 2-3 years old. You'll notice stuff. The reading stuff isn't going to pop up at one point in time.
Right.
There will be other things that lead up to it that you will pay attention to. What is their speech like? How do they form sentences? Are they able to have conversation? All of those things are precursor to what might be a reading problem. However, maybe you get to the point where there is a reading problem. The first thing is seek a specialist. I am not a specialist as it relates to dyslexia.
Okay.
But there are people out there. There are organizations out there for whom you can go and get an early intervention exam or an assessment if you think that there is an issue. And the sooner you do it, the better. You do not want to have to remediate a 3rd grader, a 4th grader, a 8th grader, a 11th grader. You don't want to, it can be done, but you don't want to have to do that.
Yeah.
You want to take care of it as soon as you see it. And don't worry about stigma and, oh my gosh, and what are people get all of that out of your head, because the sooner you can fix it, the better the experience going forward will be.
So that brings up another question. And this one is for me this time, not everyone's in the chat, because I know there are a lot of high performing professionals that also struggle with reading and they never got their own support and potentially may have dyslexia, a word for some reason I can't say today, or some other kind of reading literacy challenges that may be going on that could have even been corrected had they had a specialist to support them, or even someone like you who was able to identify, like, hey, we need some more support around that. And now they have children. And again, they're high performing, they're successful, they're doing their thing every day out in the world, but then they're hesitant to support their own children around this area. So sometimes they'll push it off as, I don't know what's wrong with this child with reading, because they don't necessarily want their child to hear them stutter or whatever the issue may be. Is there something that you would recommend for us who come in contact with high-level professionals who, are struggling with that? Because there's a bit of ego there as well. Yes. With approaching, and I'm sure you deal with this all the time, both in your coach hat as well as your literacy consultant hat.
So you are absolutely right. I would say two things. The first is, if as a parent, you recognize for yourself that there may have been some things that you didn't catch on to or hold on to in your own reading process, helping your child as early as possible in their process will help remediate you too.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
The other thing, if you're still not feeling that, right, there are plenty of organizations and programs out there in the world. Now, obviously, when the world was open, they were easier to get to, mm-hmm. but there are lots and lots of resources in the community where you can get help for your child. So don't forget to start with the classroom teacher.
Right.
Classroom teachers are used to dealing with folks at varying levels. And while they sometimes have to teach to the middle, mm-hmm. that doesn't mean they don't understand what to do with those that are behind or those that are ahead. And so I would start with the classroom teacher. What do you think they need? What are your suggestions on where I can get help?
Yeah.
Many school teachers have their own tutoring gigs on the side.
Which is a good point.
So that may be a resource. Often at schools, they will tell you this community, or they have flyers for everybody. Mm-hmm. So if it's not the classroom teacher, I would talk to, if the school has a reading specialist or a reading interventionist, ask for suggestions from them and or the principal. The principal is typically connected in the community and would know where certain programs are in existence.
That's a really valuable point. So something that came up twice, and this is kind of a parlay question as I'm looking in the chat for additionals as well. There are also children who have hearing impairment that has been unchecked or, hasn't been caught yet, that is impacting their ability to express what they're reading. And because they don't want to be judged for the way that they're expressing words, they look like children who have hard time reading, right? So is there a way, and I know that because my son is partially hearing impaired, so we learned really early. He's 24 now and a parent of his own. That's why I'm a G-bunny. But we learned really early, like there was something going on with him at 2 that we noticed that his sound was off. But not everyone catches that so early. So are there things that parents and teachers and other co-sponsoring adults that are coming into the care of children that they can look for to just not jump to a conclusion that it's a literacy issue versus there could be something else going on, such as hearing issues?
Absolutely. So hearing issue is one that often shows up. Mm-hmm. The other thing is vision issues. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so a good pediatrician will have done or can do all of those types of assessments or screeners to make sure to basically eliminate doubt about certain things.
Yeah.
And it's okay to ask the pediatrician, mm-hmm. look, this is what I'm noticing, or would you please check for this, or give me a referral to go here to get checked for this, mm-hmm. to make sure, because you want to make sure that you're dealing with a clean slate, if you will, that you're not going to be up against some other obstacles. And if you are, you need to know where they are.
Yeah.
You can't just run across and run over the obstacles without addressing them. So yes, hearing, vision, speech, mm-hmm. those are the top 3 of things that could slow down reading development.
That's so important. Nancy said also auditory parentheses, language processing disorders are definitely something to be to take into account for. So for all the parents that are listening, or people who are, again, co-sponsoring adults that are, near other caregivers around children that might be struggling and sharing with you, like, oh, Johnny's just not reading, or he's just not on level, or, Tina's just not doing well, encourage them to get full developmental workups, as Robyn is suggesting, just to rule out that there are other potential contributors to that may or may not be the cause of, or at least correlated with, whatever's going on in their potential literacy issue. And then you can address that with the appropriate support. So last question, Robyn, that I think is coming up for a lot of the people is, you mentioned these 2 T words a couple of times, and, treat us like a 5th grader. What is the difference between teachers versus tutors?
So the quick answer is, teachers have been trained in a wide range of areas. So in many different disciplines. And even if that teacher is focusing on one subject area, their experience in that subject area is usually pretty broad.
Yeah.
A tutor is someone who hones into hopefully one at a time, particular issue, and works to, I don't want to use remediate because that sounds more technical, but works to eliminate an issue in one particular thing. So a tutor is not going to do, if you get a reading tutor, that tutor is not doing stamina and vocabulary and comprehension and phonemic awareness and phonics. That's not a tutor. A tutor is going to concentrate on one particular thing at a time and try to eliminate that issue or support that issue.
That makes sense. They go deeper in that issue. Yeah, which is a really good point. So actually, I thought that I lied. I thought that was the last question, but we have another question in the chat. And just a reminder for everyone to fill out the poll question, which is, do you need assistance with literacy support for your kids? So make sure you fill out that poll, which is right at the top of where this chat is. So the other question we had is, what is the difference between what you do and a tutor?
So I will tell you, I hate tutoring. I'm not
transparency all day. I love it.
All day transparency. I do not like tutoring. That's not where I find my joy. Some people like that. That's not my, I want to help families figure out what they can do to be helpful so they may not need a tutor.
Right.
So tutoring is just not my thing. I don't necessarily like working with, crazy as this sounds, more transparency, children one-on-one. Again, it's not my jam. That's not my thing.
No, I totally appreciate that. Like I say,
I'd rather work with the adults that are working with the children to help them figure out how to reach them better, how to support them better, that kind of thing.
You're what I call an architect. You want to create the blueprint, scan the landscape, make sure everything is correct. Here are the rooms that you need to walk in, what you need to do, but you're not necessarily the construction worker who's on the ground in the dirt building everything. And you might have done that to get to the point where you are to be a really excellent architect. But no, that makes completely sense. I resonate with other architects, so I get that.
I'm glad that makes sense.
It did.
I also want to say that in that space, I have a Facebook group called the Parents Literacy Coach, where I drop all kinds of information about what, again, families can do to work with, support, encourage literacy skill development for the children that live in their house, and or, like you said, they are co-sponsoring.
No, I love it. I just typed type Parents Literacy Coach on Facebook in there. If you have a specific link, please be sure to drop that in the stage area of the chat when you get a chance. You have been amazing. I know I personally have learned so much from you. I'm sure everyone else resonates. I see great stuff, Robyn. Never thought about all of this. This is good information. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for taking some time up to deal with my literacy stumbles that I don't normally have, by the way, until you're on the screen. I was like, oh, what is that? What is coming up for Nikita? So thank you so much for being here and giving such valuable support.